In this video, we are going to be taking a look at fractions, decimals, and percents. Now, the goal for today's video is to be able to convert fractions, decimals, and percents. And the essential question that we are going to try to answer throughout the video is how can you convert between fractions, decimals, and percents. Now, before we get started, I'm just going to show you how fractions, decimals, and percents are all related. Now, I do have a 100s chart right here. This is a 10 by 10 chart. Okay, so once again, each square is going to represent 1%. Now, if I'm taking a look at this 100 chart here, I can see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 total columns shaded in, along with 1, 2, 3, 4 single squares shaded in. So that's a total of 74 squares that are shaded in. Okay, now if I am, and I almost just about did it, if I am writing this as a percentage, that would equal 74%. If I would write this as a decimal, that would equal 74 hundredths, or 74 out of 100 are shaded in. If I were to write this as a fraction, we would say 74 out of 100 are shaded in. Okay, so you can see how they're all related. All of these actually represent the same thing, which is 74 out of 100, whether it's a percent, decimal, or fraction. Now, what we will do is we are going to take a look at how you can convert between fractions, decimals, and percents. Now, the first thing you will need to do is turn to page 255 in your standard practice book, and we are going to unlock this problem. Now, it says in your book, at page 255, every percent and decimal number can also be written as a fraction. All fractions can be written as decimals and percents. For example, 2/5 of the song embodies music collection or country songs. What percent of her song collection is country? Now, first of all, what we are going to do is try to figure the percent here out. So it says write the percent that is equivalent to 2/5. Okay, so what we will do, we'll set up the equivalent fraction with the denominator of 100. Okay, so what we are trying to do is figure out, 2/5. What would it be if it had a denominator of 100? So we have a missing numerator, but the denominator there is 100. Okay, now step 2. By what factor can you multiply the denominator to get 100? So we take 5 times 20, and that's going to give us 100. So we know whatever you do to the denominator, you must do to the numerator. So we take 2, multiply that by 20 as well. So we have 40 over 100. Okay, now whenever we have a fraction that's over 100, it's very simple to write that fraction as a percent, because we even saw in the previous slide that anything out of 100 is actually the numerator, that's the percentage. Okay, so write the fraction as a percent. 40 over 100 equals 40%. So that means 2/5 equals 40%. Now let's take a look at another one here. Okay, another example. It says write 8/25 as a decimal. Okay, now step 1, what we want to do is we want to write an equivalent fraction with a denominator of 100. Okay, so what we have here is we take 8/25, okay, and we think about the denominator as 100. So what times 25 equals 100? We know that it is 4. 8 times 4 we know gives us 32. Okay, and then write the fraction as a decimal. We have 32 hundredths here, and we know that that just equals 32 hundredths, written just like that, writing that fraction as a decimal. Okay, now let's take a look at letter B. It says write 90% as a fraction in simplest terms. Okay, now it is important just to remember a fraction is the simplest terms. What we need to do is divide by the greatest common factor. Okay, so we take 90%. First of all, we can write it as a fraction, 90 over 100. Okay, and then we take 90 over 100, and we can divide both numbers by 10, because that is the greatest common factor, giving us 9/10. Okay, let's take a look at a couple more of these together. It says by what factor, so it's saying complete the steps to write 7/20ths as a percent. Now this is on page 256. And it says, first of all, by what factor should you multiply the denominator and the numerator? So we need to think about 20 times what number equals 100. And if we need to figure out 20 times what equals 100, we could even do division, 100, and then divided by 20. That's going to give us 5. Okay, so we know that 20 times what number equals 100? 20 times 5 equals 100. Okay, so for 7/20ths, what is the equivalent fraction with the denominator of 100 if we're taking a look at that? So we multiply the denominator by 100 and then also the numerator by 100. Okay, so we have 35 hundredths here. Okay, now what percent is equivalent to 7/20ths? We can see that 35 hundredths here for our fractions, which gives us 35%. Now there's another way to do this as well. Okay, I touched on this a little bit in the previous video. Whenever we're changing a fraction to a decimal, we can just divide that numerator by the denominator. So 7 divided by 20, that's going to give me 35 hundredths that way, okay, as a decimal. Now we did talk about in the previous video as well that 35 hundredths, if we want to change that to a percent, we can just take that decimal, move it 2 places to the right. We have our decimal there to the right of the ones place, which gives us 35% as well. Okay, so you can go through this process that I showed you, or you can even just divide that numerator by the denominator, giving you your decimal, then changing that decimal to a percent. Okay, let's take a look at number 4, writing 1/4 as a decimal. Okay, what we could do is we could set it up 1/4, trying to figure out what 4 times what number equals 100. Okay, and that is 25. So if we multiply the denominator by 25, we need to multiply the numerator by 25. That's given us 25 hundredths now. And then we can just write 25 hundredths as that decimal. Okay, another way to do this, we can just take 1 and divide that by 4, the numerator by the denominator, and that gives us the same answer as well. So either way will work completely fine. Okay, number 5, let's take a look at that. Write 3/10 as a percent. Okay, so what we can do, we can take this 3/10, think about what times 10 will give you 100. And I know that 10 times 10 gives me 100. So since I multiply the denominator by 10, I can multiply the numerator by 10. 30 times 10 gives me 30. Now 30 hundredths, okay, also equals 30%. And then once again with this, you can take that 3, divide that by 10, or the numerator divide that by the denominator. That gives you 0.3. Now whenever you change a decimal to a percent, we just move that decimal 2 places to the right, 1, 2, put your decimal there, 30, giving you 30% as well. Okay, let's take a look at number 6. Now we have 80% as a fraction. Let me erase some of this here. So 80% as a fraction. Now we know right away that 80%, okay, is going to be 80 out of 100. Anytime we're dealing with a percentage, it's always can be written over 100 there. And we don't even need to do any of the converting like we did with 1/4 as a decimal or 3/10 as a percent. We just know that percentages are always out of 100, so we can write 80 hundredths here as the fraction. Now you have number 7 through 18 to do, And what I want you to do is complete all of these all by yourself. And when you press play, I will have the answers for you. Just keep in mind some of the tips that I gave you. If you need to go back and review some of the video, feel free to do that. Okay, keep in mind, before I let you on your own with this, let's take a look at number 10. If we're doing 75% as a fraction, I do want you to start reducing these. Now, I know I did not do that with the previous one, okay, but if we're taking 75 hundredths, I do want you to reduce that. Okay, for example, with this, I know my greatest common factor would be 25. Divide 25 by both numerator and denominator, and that'll give me 3/4. So once again, I do want you to write these fractions in simplest terms. So you can do 7 through 18, and when you're finished with 7 through 18, you can press play. I'm going to have the answers for you. So I want you to pause the video now. Okay, here are the answers for numbers 7 through 18. Make sure your answers match mine. Okay, and if they do not, you may need to go back, or I do want you to go back and check and see where you went wrong. Okay, let's take a look at number 19. It says Whitney has finished 9/20ths of her book. What percent of the book does Whitney still need to read? Okay, so the first thing we need to figure out is what percentage 9/20ths actually equals. And I do want you to figure this part out all by yourself. That would be the first step, and then we'll go from there. So I want you to pause the video now. Okay, so we know that Whitney has finished actually 45% of her book, and what we need to figure out is what percent of the book does Whitney still need to read. And what we will do, we will take that 45% and we'll take it away from 100. Okay, 100 minus 45, and actually 55% of the book Whitney still does need to read. Okay, now I want you to complete number 20 all by yourself, and when you're finished, you can press play, and I will have the answer for you. So pause the video now. Okay, you can take a look that he still needs to complete 84% of his work. 4/25 equals 16%. Then I took that 100, I subtracted 16 from 100, giving me 84, so 84%. So let's take a look at that essential question. How can you convert between fractions, decimals, and percentages? Okay, what we see here, okay, to convert a fraction to a percent, write an equivalent fraction with a denominator of 100. Then I write the digits of the number followed by the percent symbol. To write a percent as a fraction, I take the digits in front of the percent symbol and make them the numerator with the denominator of 100. I also taught you a trick with your calculator or division that you can divide that numerator by the denominator and then also get a decimal as well. Okay, so this is how you convert fractions, decimals, and percents. If you have any questions about this concept, please come and see me.